Hi, I'm Steve Hayes, and welcome to This Is My Story. I love stories, and what I find most compelling about them is when I can talk to other people about what's going on in their lives. And when you hear everything that has come together to make them who they are, it's really powerful. So please listen along with This Is My Story.
I'm Caleb Pruett, and this is my story.
All right, hey everybody. Welcome to This Is My Story with Steve Hayes. Today we are privileged to have Caleb Pruett with us. What's up, Caleb?
I don't know if it's a privilege, but I'm here.
Man, it's such a privilege. Caleb's one of my favorite dudes. This is what I always tell people about Caleb. If you don't like Caleb Pruett, there's something wrong with you. He's just one of the most likable people I've ever met and just a cool guy. We've had the chance to spend a lot of time together recently because we've been working on a project for my house, and Caleb's been very helpful. So I appreciate him a ton. But one of the things that's cool about you, man, and people don't know this about you, people would meet you and they would think he's a country boy. He's got a house. He's got himself a little ranch out there, pretty much, 40 acres and some cows and a pond. He's out there feeding the cows hay and got an old Ford truck he's working on, and they just think Caleb Pruett is just your typical kind of country dude, Corsicana dude. But the more you dig into your story, you are like you've lived internationally. You have been all over the world. You've guided fishing in Alaska. You have done
a few things.
You've done a whole bunch of things that most people have never done. And so I'm really excited about your story. So, I mean, let's start there. Where were you born, and where'd you grow up?
So the geography lesson of my life?
Yeah, let's do that, man.
It is a geography lesson.
It's not
too.
simple.
No, I was born, when people are like, where are you from?
Yeah.
They say, where are you from? Well, it's like, well, I live in Corsicana. And I'm kind of now from Corsicana.
Yeah.
But I was born in Katy. Texas.
Down by Houston.
Down by Houston. Houston kid.
And you lived there until what?
So I lived there off and on multiple times.
Okay.
So I was born there and only lived there for a few months, and we moved right to Ponca City, Oklahoma.
Okay.
So that was where I grew up as a baby in Ponca City, as a toddler. And when I was 5, we were in Ponca City, and my dad was working for Conoco at the time, a little oil and gas company.
Yeah, little bitty
one. Yeah, little bitty, yeah.
Fixer-upper company.
He was working there's a big refinery in Ponca City that Conoco owned, and they transferred him to Dubai, United Arab Emirates.
And you lived in Dubai for what, 5 years?
5 years, yeah. I spent all my elementary school years, kindergarten through 4th grade, in Dubai.
Man. What a crazy place to go. Now, was Dubai then what it is now?
No.
It's kind of the crown jewel of the Middle East now. And
it's huge now. At that time, they had discovered oil. They had the UAE had developed a lot of its oil, and they were really starting to capitalize on all of it. So they had accumulated a lot of wealth, and they were starting to spend it more on visible things, on infrastructure things. They had just completed the Burj Al Arab Hotel when we were there, while we were there. Started construction on the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest tower in the world, I think still.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So that was on, like, as we were in Dubai, the Burj Al Arab popped up, Wild Wadi water park, all these things started popping up, building downtown Dubai up.
Right.
They were on like floor 60 of the Burj Khalifa when we left. So it was this huge spear starting to shoot up into the sky with cranes all over it as we were moving out of Dubai.
They had the dancing fountains yet?
They didn't have the dancing fountains yet. They hadn't developed all that underneath it. It was just a huge construction project. They were excavating dirt, and this tower was being built. So it was really kind of the birth of that really extravagant Dubai that you see now.
Yeah,
we were there right when that was all really being hatched. So
I remember. So I went to Dubai for like a day on a layover from New York to Uganda.
Yeah,
and the thing I remember about Dubai is when we stepped out of the airport, it takes your breath away. It's so hot.
So hot.
It's the hottest place I think I've ever been. Like you walk out of the door and it's like walking into a sauna.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. Do you remember it being what's your enduring memory as a kid, as a 5-year-old, right?
5-year-old? 5, 6, 7, yeah.
So you show up, Katy, Texas boy.
Yeah.
To
going from
Dubai.
Northern Oklahoma too.
Yeah.
It was weird. We traveled back and forth to the U.S. quite a bit. We would come home every summer and every Christmas. And I think at the time the company actually coordinated that. They allowed us to do that, just being expats in Dubai. And they, we'd come home for Christmas, we'd fly to DFW. And back then there was no nonstop, so we'd fly London, usually Heathrow or Gatwick, and transfer over between airports and then land in DFW. And we'd come home for Christmas. You'd fly back to Dubai after Christmas was over in early January. And you'd leave Dallas in January. Dallas, it could be 30, it could be 20, or it could be 50, but it was chilly.
Right.
And you'd land in Dubai, and it would be cooler in Dubai, but at night in Dubai in January, it'd be 80.
Wow.
And so you'd get off the plane, and it's just this warmth and that was before they had jetways and the huge terminal in Dubai now. So we were getting off on a ladder, on a staircase, going to a bus over, from the international area. And so, just getting on that hot tarmac and
they talked about
that.
When we were there that that people's tires would melt.
I believe that, yeah.
To the road.
During the summertime, the houses were really what would tell you how hot it would get, because you'd have a 2,000 square foot house and it'd be built out of, it was cinder block wall construction. They'd coat it in like gunite and stuff. Mm-hmm. So you'd have concrete walls essentially, and there would be like 2 5-ton AC units on top of a little 2,000 square foot house.
Wow.
Just huge AC units to keep these things cooled. I remember my dad talking about this. We had a water storage tank in the backyard, an above ground storage tank. And then we had a hot water heater inside, and these storage tanks were black. And we actually flipped off the hot water heater.
Wow.
And would use the hot water heater to cool water to room temperature inside the house.
Be so hot.
Because that storage tank outside was so hot.
Wow.
So we would flip the water around, and your cool water would come out of your hot water heater that was inside cooling off, and your hot water came out of that outdoor black storage tank through the cool water faucet that was just scalding hot.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was weird.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was a weird way of living.
And you told me, I think a lot of people think that if you go and live somewhere like that, that everything is just so different, and you don't, like, how do you take trips and how do you drive places and stuff? But it's just like being here. You take trips just like you would here.
Yeah.
What's the coolest trip y'all took when you lived in Dubai?
Yeah, Dubai was different too because it was super westernized, and it still is super westernized. We had good family friends that lived in Cairo, Egypt, and it was a little not as westernized in Cairo. And so like the ladies wouldn't drive in Cairo. The wife they had a driver, and the wife wouldn't drive. Dubai, my mom could drive.
Right.
But we took several trips. We actually drove around Dubai a lot, around the UAE a lot. Dubai proper, there's kind of, I guess they're really suburbs. There's just a bunch of decent sized cities along the coast there, along the Persian Gulf. And so you'd go Dubai, and then Abu Dhabi's right next to it. and I think Abu Dhabi is actually the capital. And then there's Ras Al Khaimah and a bunch of different cities dotted up and down the coast that we'd go to regularly. Jebel Ali was where the port was, and I think they moved the school out that way, the American school that I went to. So we would, we'd go inner city travel all the time. It wasn't anything to drive over to Abu Dhabi for a certain market or something like that. And then we would go out to the desert. We'd go dooning. There's a bunch of government land that's just wide open desert, and we'd go. There were kind of more plotted areas that were regular dooning areas. So there were like gas stations where you'd air down your tires and air up your tires when you came out of the desert. And we'd go camp out there, and there were some villages you could drive through that were pretty circulated by tourists and by locals that would go dooning and stuff. And we'd do the beach. And
so it wasn't the kind of place where you were just locked in your house.
No,
all the time
not
and
at
you
all.
couldn't venture out.
Not at all. We did tons of stuff. We traveled. We drove down to Oman and we'd go snorkeling at Corfacon and
cool.
Yeah.
You want to hear a good UAE joke? By the way,
I love jokes.
Yeah, you ready?
I laugh at all of them.
Did you know that the people in Dubai don't like the Flintstones, but the people in Abu Dhabi do? It's terrible, isn't it? Abu Dhabi do.
Abu Dhabi do. I love a good joke.
So where'd y'all go from Dubai?
Yeah,
there
so
5 years, and then,
there
then
5
where?
years and then gone. We went back to Houston. Dad
Okay.
got transferred back to the Houston office. So,
So you're back in Katy.
back in Katy, yeah, back within like 5 miles of where I was born.
And then
same town.
what's the next stop? You go to Alaska at some point along this journey.
So we do. I spent a big time in Katy that second time around. We were there from 2000 2001 until 07, I think. 06.
All right.
I finished my sophomore. I finished fifth grade in Dubai or in Katy. Went all of junior high and finished my sophomore year in Katy. And we transferred at the end of my sophomore year. We transferred to Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Dad went to work at Phillips 66 headquarters in Bartlesville. They combined, they merged companies during that time. Conoco and Phillips became ConocoPhillips. He went to work in Bartlesville. We lived in Bartlesville for I think 8 months, and it was about this time. It was about March, April, and we got basically emergency orders to transfer to Anchorage, Alaska. I believe the way that ended up happening is there was a death in the company of one of the senior leaders at the Anchorage office, and I don't know but something happened to somebody. I think it may have been cancer actually, and they were pulled out, and they transferred Dad up there immediately. So it was I'm doing my junior year in Bartlesville, starting to settle in, and then boom, we moved within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I remember coming in that night. It was kind of later that evening, and Dad was sitting in the living room, and it was like 9 o'clock. It was dark. And he goes, "Caleb, we need to talk." And I remember I'm like, "Dad, oh man, what did I do?" I'm racking my brain. I'm like, "Oh, we need to talk. That's not good." And he's like, "Sit down. We need to talk." And I'm like, "Oh, great. What did I do?" And he goes, "We're being transferred to Alaska." And I remember kind of like weeping, out of relief that I didn't do something to get me in trouble, and B, because I was like, Alaska, that's awesome, but man, I really like it here, and this is terrible. So it was like all these weird emotions, like relief and sadness and excitedness.
Yeah.
And we ended up flying out. We had show cows at our house in Bartlesville. We hauled them down to my grandma's place and turned them out to pasture and kind of settled all of our dealings there in like a week, and I was gone. I was starting school in Anchorage, Alaska as a junior.
That's crazy. So you're in you're in the desert
for
5 years.
Yeah. Then
big city. You're in the frozen tundra
Yeah.
of
Alaska.
Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah.
How long did y'all stay there?
So my parents were there. So I graduated high school in Alaska from Chugiak High School.
Chugiak High School. How about that?
Yeah, so I graduated, finished my junior year, graduated high school there. My parents stayed behind in Anchorage for less than a year after that. I think it was just a few months. It was through that summer because some of my family came up and vacationed, and I stayed up there that summer.
And didn't you do some sort of fishing?
Yeah. So I graduated high school, and my my hurdles coach, who was also the wrestling coach, Coach Huffer, basically came to me and was like, "Hey, so my family and I have a fish camp out on near the Igigik River, and we commercial salmon fish. We've got a camp on the beach, and then I have a gill net boat that we go out from the beach and fish." And he said, "Do you want to come commercial salmon fishing this summer?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So
yeah,
I went out and spent, I think, about 6 weeks out in the remote Alaskan wilderness. There was a cannery on the beach, Coffee Point Seafoods.
Okay.
And that was it. I can't
Nothing.
tell you how far away we were from anything, really.
You run into bear?
Nothing. Oh, yeah.
All the time. Wolf?
All the time. I never saw any wolves there. We had seals come up on the beach. Every now and then we'd get a baby seal up on the beach, like hugging one of our buoys. That was always kind of like, wow, that's crazy. A lot of bears.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of bears. We saw bears every night. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, we would shoot these little ground squirrels. I don't know if we were supposed to or not, but there were ground squirrels all over the place in this sand on these dunes, and we'd shoot them, and with BB guns or 22s, and the bears would come up. It would just draw them up, and so there were just bears all the time. And then a dead seal or dead fish and stuff would, wash up on the beach, and so you'd be going down the beach late in the evening or in the middle of the night, and there'd be just 2 or 3 bears on the beach, and it's like, oh,
it's crazy.
Yeah, you definitely. The bears are weird too because you see them so often. It's like, there's a bear.
Yeah.
And so you don't really freak out, but at the same time, it's like even the really experienced people are like, no, stay back. Like, don't get too close. So
I could hear about all your adventures forever. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really fun to talk about them. But one of the main reasons we do this whole deal, and I want to make sure we have enough time to really get into it, but the main reasons we do this whole deal and love hearing stories from people like you is, we share faith in Christ.
Absolutely.
And that has become a huge, it's everything to us.
Yeah.
So at what point did you come to know Christ? How did that make an impact in your life? You're this kid who, I'm sure, even though it's exciting to go all these places, it had to be a bit confusing for you at a young age to uproot, and at the very least unsettling at times to do that.
Yeah.
What role did Jesus play in your upbringing, and when did you come to embrace Jesus for yourself?
Yeah. So I can say through all these moves and things, the one thing I saw and continually helped point me back was the faith of my parents and their faith in taking these leaps of faith and moving to these places. That was always the top of their consideration, was what does God want us to do when something like this would arise. Myself personally, I came to know Jesus at a really, really young age, and I'm still getting to know him more and more every day, even today. So it's been a 30-year-long process, really, from my parents praying for me as a baby that I would come to know Jesus, to me actually coming to know Jesus as a young boy. I really vividly remember praying with my dad that I wanted to accept Jesus right before we moved to Dubai. I had listened to the Left Behind series on the radio.
Okay.
If you remember that back in the 90s. And that kind of, the realness of that Left Behind series kind of like, piqued my interest. And so I started asking questions. And as these questions got answered, it really directed me more and more and more toward a relationship with Christ.
Right.
While we were in Dubai, I was had just turned, I think I was between 8 and 9, and that's one thing I'm bummed about, is I don't remember the exact day when I was baptized. But I publicly professed in church that I chose to follow Christ and that I wanted to be baptized. And so I was baptized in Dubai,
Cool.
in a swimming pool, in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And really, that's what really, that time really, sparked my faith even more forward. And then growing up, moving through all these places as a believer, after getting transferred back to the States, just seeing my parents really set an example for me and my siblings for what a Christ follower looks like, was really important, played a big role. And just, as a kid, as a teenager growing up in Katy, Texas, and all the junk that goes along with that, I've had sort of key moments where my faith really made sense and really opened up my eyes to what's been going on and what's to come from being a believer. So just having, and I think anybody that's lost a friend, lost someone they know, probably experiences sort of that revelation at some point if they're a believer. And had a gal that I knew in high school as a freshman and sophomore pass away in a car wreck. And that really, it really didn't dawn on me at the time. I'm just feel like my head's below water and I'm just oblivious to what's going on around me. When I look back at that event and that time frame now, it's like, man, how weird and horrible of a time it was for me at the time. But now I look back at it and it's like, man, God really used that to grow me and develop me, mold me into what he wanted me to be. More so.
Yeah, and then your life, we didn't even talk about really half of the places that you've been, as far as just visiting, or whatever. You've been to Taiwan, you've been to Switzerland, you've been
all over Europe,
all over,
a little bit of Southeast Asia.
How has your exposure to so much of the world, how has that intersected with your faith to give you a different perspective on God?
So I kind of, a lot of times I compare my life to books, and I love to read books and different genres of books. And a lot of people's lives could be depicted as a Western or a sci-fi or something like that. And I feel like my life could be depicted as a World Book encyclopedia,
right?
Of just like all these random places, random facts, random experiences. I rodeoed as a kid. I commercial fished as a kid. It's like, such vast different experiences. But I think seeing other places, other countries in particular, in regions of the world, we've been around Europe, France, the UK. We've been, we did Thailand, living in the Middle East. I've been around Egypt some, been into parts of the Middle East, Jordan and areas like that, where you see the religions of the world. You
Right.
experience the religions of the world. I actually, in elementary school in Dubai, I had a Emirates studies class, and so we learned about Islam, and we learned about the United Arab Emirates and the Middle East, and I learned a little bit of Arabic, and
Right.
So I learned as a kid about the 5 pillars of Islam,
Right.
and that is pretty instrumental in really developing my belief in Christianity and my walk with Christ, from seeing other religions and seeing the differences,
Okay.
seeing how different a walk with Christ is versus being in this rigorous, regimented religion of Islam. And just how free you are in a walk with Christ, and how chained you are to your religion, with Islam in particular, which is one that I experienced a lot of living in the Middle East.
Right.
So I think to kind of more bluntly answer the question, seeing other religions up close, where they came from, where they're largely practiced, where you're actually a minority as a Christian, being in Thailand or being in, wherever it may be, being in Cairo, Egypt, that changes your perspective on things a lot, a whole lot.
Makes you hold it a little more dear.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we, we went to a church in Dubai that technically wasn't supposed to exist.
Right.
And I remember that. I remember it was in a house. It was a big compound of a house, and we actually ended up renting out 2 houses that were adjoined by a common wall. We knocked the common wall out and joined the living rooms together to make a bigger sanctuary as our church grew. And they've got a website now. Emirates Baptist Church International was the church that I went to there. That's and cool. So just experiencing church in that way, changes things for you.
Yeah. So, man, really cool to hear about the international perspective that you bring to things. And I think this is just something that most people don't know about you. Like I said, they see this guy who cowboy boots and a
little farm
and a Corsicana livestock auction hat,
yeah.
and the cows and everything, and they just think, well, Caleb's just a Corsicana boy, and yet you've had all these amazing experiences outside in the great big world that most people haven't had. And it's really cool to hear about how the Lord has guided you through all of that to the place where you are now. Now you're married to Ashley, who's just an amazing person. Got 2 kids.
Yep.
And
whole nother adventure of life.
Whole other adventure.
Yeah.
And you find yourself in a stage in life where stability is really important to you. You've basically laid down roots.
Yeah.
What made you decide, after all of this moving around, what made you decide, hey, I'm gonna lay down roots here?
So Corsicana in particular is another story. I think for me, wanting to kind of anchor myself in one place is just an instinct of growing up the way I grew up.
Is this the craziest foreign country you've been to, Corsicana?
This is Navarro County is the wildest place I've ever lived or visited, 100%.
I get it.
And that's, and that's the beautiful thing about it too, I think, is when you have seen other places, you learn that this isn't the norm. Navarro County isn't the norm. We like to think it is because we've lived there and it's our habitat, but there's other habitats, other places. There's other environments, there's other cultures out there, and so getting to experience the culture here is kind of neat from my perspective because I've experienced other cultures So, the cows, the livestock and all that,
Mm-hmm.
the food, barbecue, steak, that type of thing. I see it in a little bit different way. I also see it kind of coming back to roots because that's where my dad grew up in southeast Oklahoma on a dairy farm that converted to a beef cattle farm. So it's like that's where we went back to all the time for Christmas and summertime when I was moving everywhere. Home was Madill, Oklahoma for me, really. Yeah. And I think it still is. My parents have a house there and have had that house since we lived in Dubai. So we've had the house over 20 years. And that's where I've spent Christmases and summers. So home for me is that house in Cumberland,
that's
Oklahoma.
Home base.
Yeah.
So did you know when you were growing up and you would come back to those places for holidays, did you know that that's what you wanted for your life too? Something along those lines? I
think so. When I was in Alaska, I was always homesick for Oklahoma. For the farm, and when we lived in Bartlesville, that was our I thought we were kind of getting back to that. We had a little bit of a place there. We had our show cows at the house in Bartlesville. We had a little farm going, and then we uprooted and went to Alaska, and it's like, I want to go back to Oklahoma. And so I think for me, a farm, cattle, that type of thing was definitely in my guts. That's what I was programmed for from the get-go.
It had to be. You take the farm out of the boy, but you can't take the boy out of the farm, or whatever. Boy out of the farm, but the farm out of the boy.
Yeah, so as soon as we got a chance to look at land, it's like I jumped all over it. It just, the light bulb went off. I was like, what? We're living in an area, Ashley and I met. We're both from Katy, but she was at Baylor in Waco, and I was at North Texas in Denton. And we found Corsicana just by a miracle, and then,
here you are.
Here I am.
Well, we sure are glad that you found it. Sure are glad that you took some time out of your day today to come and join us and tell your story, and just, a really cool story, a really cool guy. Thanks for being you, and
I appreciate that.
And we're so glad you're here. I'm glad you decided to lay down roots here, because I couldn't imagine life without Caleb Pruett. It just kind of you're just one of those people who who are just easy. You're easy to be around. You're fun. You're kind. You just got a good way about you, man. So thanks for being you, and thanks for joining us here, and I hope we got many, many years to keep doing cool stuff together.
Me too, man.
All right, bud.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe. And if you'd like to spread the word, please consider leaving a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. Our video podcast is available on our Grace Community Church YouTube channel. This Is My Story is produced and engineered by Jake Moore and is a ministry of Grace Community Church in Corsicana, Texas. The views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the speaker and do not necessarily express the views of Grace Community Church. Thanks for listening.
That's when you're a guy on a buffalo and you get mauled by a cougar.
On a buffalo. Yes.
Straight up mauled by a cougar.
Going, yeah.
Can we please put this in the outtakes?